A night had passed without the brutality they'd expected. This only deepened Akira's unease. "Up! Up!" An American guard banged on the door frame. His voice was loud but not cruel. "Breakfast in 15 minutes." Akira slipped his feet to the cold floor. He had been told Americans starved their prisoners, fed them rotten scraps, or sometimes nothing at all. Yet here was talk of breakfast, spoken casually as if they were guests rather than enemies. "Be careful," whispered Tanaka, the soldier from the bunk beside him. "Whatever they give us might be spoiled. They would enjoy watching us get sick." Akira nodded. The stories they'd heard couldn't all be lies. The training officers had been clear. Americans were animals who enjoyed suffering. They had no honor, no sense of duty. They fought only for money and pleasure. The prisoners lined up outside the mess hall. Akira's stomach growled despite his suspicion. The last proper meal he'd had was days ago, before capture. The smell of porridge drifted from the building. Inside, American soldiers ladled food into tin bowls. Akira received his portion with stiff fingers. The porridge was plain but hot, with a small piece of bread on the side. No worms, no rot. He sat at a long table, watching others eat cautiously at first, then with growing hunger. "It's a trick," muttered Saito, an older soldier across from him. "Fatten us up before working us to death in their factories." But Akira noticed something odd. The American guards weren't watching them with hate in their eyes. One even smiled briefly at a prisoner who bowed in thanks. It unsettled him more than cruelty would have. After breakfast, they were assigned chores. Akira's group was told to clean the barracks. He swept the floor, eyes constantly darting to the guard by the door. The man leaned against the wall, rifle slung over his shoulder, occasionally glancing at a small photograph he pulled from his pocket. What is he looking at? Akira wondered. The guard noticed him staring and quickly tucked the photo away. At midday, they were given more food. Simple stew with vegetables, but warm and filling. Akira ate every bite, waiting for the catch, the moment when things would turn. It had to come. In the afternoon, an American officer addressed them through a translator. Rules were explained, work schedules outlined, mealtimes confirmed. Nothing about torture, nothing about punishment details, just routines and expectations. Akira's training hadn't prepared him for this. Kindness was more disorienting than cruelty would have been. He could fight against hatred, steel himself against pain. But how should he armor himself against ordinary decency? "They're playing with our minds," he told himself, as he folded his blanket that evening. "This is how they break men. False kindness before the true face emerges." He ran his fingers over the rough wool of the blanket. It was worn but clean. Like everything else here, basic but sufficient. Nothing like the hellish prison camps his commanders had described. The harsh clang of a bell jolted Akira from sleep. His body tensed, ready for the shouts and violence that surely would follow. The barracks was cold, his breath visible in small puffs, but the thin blanket had kept the worst of the chill away. He sat up quickly, noticing the other men doing the same, each face tight with the same expectation of brutality. "Line up! Breakfast time!" called the guard, his tone matter-of-fact. Akira pulled on his worn boots, fingers still stiff from sleep. This must be the day when the real treatment began. Forced marches through snow, work until collapse, punishment for imagined offenses. He steeled himself, joining the line of prisoners filing out of the barracks. The morning air bit at his face as they shuffled toward the mess hall. Guards flanked them, rifles held casually, not pointed. No one shouted. No one struck the slow or weak. Akira kept his eyes down, waiting for the trap to spring. The mess hall was warm, the smell of food hanging in the air. Akira's bowl was filled with a thick, pale porridge. Oatmeal, he would later learn. A slice of bread sat beside it, and a cup of dark, steaming liquid. Coffee, strange and bitter. Nothing like the tea of home. He stared at the food, suspicious. Too much, whispered Tanaka as they sat. They want us fattened for something. Maybe they need strong workers, added Saito, stirring his oatmeal with distrust. Akira nodded in agreement, but a question nagged at him. The American prisoners he had seen before his capture had been thin, hollow-eyed. If Americans tortured their prisoners, why didn't those men look worse? And why was every Japanese prisoner here receiving the same portion, the same food, the same treatment? Eat while it's warm, a guard called through the translator. No mockery in his voice, no cruel laugh. The oatmeal was bland but filling, the texture unfamiliar on Akira's tongue. The coffee made him wince, but its warmth spread through his chest. He found himself scraping the bowl clean, hunger overriding suspicion. After breakfast, they were led outside. Snow had fallen overnight, covering the camp in white. Akira was handed a shovel. Clear the paths, the translator explained, from barracks to mess hall, from mess hall to infirmary. For hours, Akira pushed snow aside, watching the guards from the corner of his eye. They stood at a distance, stamping their feet against the cold, occasionally speaking to each other. They did not yell. They did not rush the workers with rifle butts or fists. When an older prisoner slowed, wheezing with effort, a guard merely motioned for a younger man to take his place. By afternoon, Akira's back ached, but the work had kept him warm. His mind circled the same confusing thoughts. This was not the treatment he had been promised. This was not the enemy he had been taught to hate. At evening roll call, with the prisoners lined up in neat rows for counting, Akira noticed something strange. American soldiers were carrying pine branches into the mess hall. The fresh, sharp smell of resin drifted across the yard, catching in his throat with unexpected familiarity. Winter in his village. The new year. His mother sweeping the path to their door, pine decorations hanging. A forgotten feeling of peace. Akira watched, bewildered, as more Americans carried boxes of paper decorations toward the building. One soldier laughed, holding up a string of colored paper. Another carefully balanced candles in a box. "What are they doing?" he whispered to Tanaka. "Preparing for something," Tanaka replied, his voice tight with suspicion. But what enemy prepared for celebration in a prison camp? What enemy hung decorations while watching over those they should despise? Akira stared at the mess hall door as it closed behind the soldiers, taking with it the scent of pine and the questions he couldn't answer. Morning light filtered through the small windows of the barracks, waking Akira before the bell. He lay still, listening to the soft snores of the other men. His mind kept returning to the pine branches, the decorations. What were the Americans planning? At breakfast, the prisoners filed into the mess hall and stopped, frozen in surprise. In the corner stood a full pine tree, decorated with paper chains, tiny carved figures, and strange shining ornaments. Candles sat unlit in little holders attached to branches. A golden star perched at the top. "Christmas tree," a guard explained, noticing their stares. Akira had heard of Christmas, a Western holiday for their god. But why here? Why for prisoners? As they ate their porridge, whispers passed between the men. "The Americans are playing games," Tanaka muttered. "This is to mock us. Maybe they'll make us worship their god," another prisoner suggested. "It's for them, not us," said Saito. "They don't care what we think." Akira said nothing, watching how the American guards glanced at the tree with small smiles. They didn't look like men planning cruelty. They looked homesick. The next day was Christmas Eve. The mood in the camp changed subtly. Guards seemed less stern, occasionally humming tunes Akira didn't recognize. That afternoon, as the prisoners returned from their work details, they were each handed a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "What is this?" Akira asked, suspicious. "Christmas gift," replied the translator. "From Red Cross." Inside Akira's package was a bright orange, its skin smooth under his fingers. Other men received candy or small tins of tobacco. One found a chocolate bar and stared at it in disbelief. That night, they were allowed to stay in the mess hall after dinner. The candles on the tree were lit, casting warm light across the room. American guards gathered near the tree, and a man Akira had seen before, the chaplain, stood before them. They began to sing. The words were English, incomprehensible, but the melodies rose and fell like gentle waves. Akira watched their faces, illuminated by candlelight. These men, supposedly monsters, sang with closed eyes, some with hands clasped. One tall guard had tears on his cheeks. Later, they were served a special dinner: ham, potatoes, bread still warm from the oven. At the end came pie, sweet and rich, unlike anything Akira had tasted before. Before they ate, the chaplain stood and spoke, the translator quietly relaying his words. "Lord, on this holy night, bless this food. Bless these men far from home. Bring comfort to our soldiers and to those across the sea who long for peace as we do." Akira's hands trembled as he lifted his fork. With each bite of pie, shame rose in his throat. How could these enemies pray for his people? How could they show such kindness? It wasn't supposed to be this way. Americans were devils. That's what they'd told him. But devils didn't pray for their enemies. Devils didn't share feasts and sing songs about peace. After dinner, sitting alone on his bunk, Akira studied the orange peel in his palm. He had eaten the fruit slowly, savoring each sweet, juicy segment. The scent still clung to his fingers, bright and clean. Without understanding why, he tucked the peel under his blanket. A secret treasure. He lay down, pulling the blanket to his chin, the orange scent surrounding him. Sleep came, but it was uneasy, filled with dreams of home mixed with candlelight and strange songs about peace in a language he couldn't understand. The morning light seemed different somehow. Akira sat at the wooden table, stirring his oatmeal slowly. Christmas had passed, but its ghost lingered in the air. In the now undecorated corner where the tree had stood, in the faint smell of pine that still clung to the mess hall. Around him, heated whispers bounced between the prisoners. "It was to make fools of us," Tanaka insisted, his face pinched with anger. "Americans think we're children to be distracted with treats." "The food was good," Saito shrugged. "Why question it?" "Because nothing comes free from enemies," another man snapped. "They want something. Maybe to show their newspapers how well they treat us, while our people suffer. Or to convert us to their religion," someone else added. Akira kept his eyes on his bowl, not trusting himself to speak. The taste of yesterday's pie lingered in his memory. Sweet, warm, almost like his mother's bean cakes, but different. The memory confused him. It wasn't right to enjoy the enemy's food so much. After breakfast, the routine of the camp resumed as if nothing had happened. They shoveled paths through fresh snow, stood for roll call in the cold yard, and received their weekly Red Cross parcels. Akira's contained a small tube of toothpaste, a pair of socks, and a letter form with instructions to write home. He stared at the blank paper, wondering what he could possibly say. During work detail, he found himself remembering the chaplain's prayer. "Those across the sea who long for peace." The words kept returning, unwelcome but persistent. Did Americans truly think of Japanese as people who wanted peace? His training had taught him they saw the Japanese as animals, less than human. "Hey, what's wrong with you today?" Tanaka nudged him. "You're quiet." "Just tired," Akira mumbled. "Did you hear what Kenji was saying? The Americans only fed us well because some international committee was visiting. Back to thin soup now." Tanaka laughed bitterly. Akira nodded, unable to join in the joke. He watched the guards from the corner of his eye. They looked the same as before Christmas, young men with rifles stamping their feet against the cold. But now he noticed other things. One guard sharing a cigarette with another, a photo being passed around, small smiles at some joke. That night in the barracks, Akira lay awake long after lights out. Carefully, he reached under his mattress, where he'd hidden the orange peel. The scent wasn't as strong now, but it was still there, bright, clean, like sunshine. He curled his fingers around it, then quickly stuffed it back when shame washed over him. What kind of soldier felt grateful to his captors? What would his father say if he knew Akira treasured an enemy's gift? Outside, boots crunched in snow as a guard made his rounds. The footsteps paused near their window. Then, soft and clear in the night air, came a gentle humming. Akira recognized the tune immediately. One of the Christmas hymns. The guard wasn't singing words, just the melody, probably not even aware he was doing it. Akira lay perfectly still, staring at the dark ceiling. The tune should have irritated him, a reminder of American arrogance. Instead, it felt strangely soothing, like a lullaby. The realization disturbed him more than any harsh treatment could have. How could an enemy's song bring comfort? What was happening to the soldier he had been? The humming faded as the guard moved on. Akira remained awake, caught between worlds, no longer certain of anything he had once believed. 4 days after Christmas, the world turned white again. Snow fell in thick, silent flakes, covering the camp in a fresh blanket that needed clearing. Akira gripped his shovel tightly, working near the eastern fence where drifts piled highest. The cold bit through his gloves. His breath made small clouds that vanished quickly. 2 American guards stood nearby, stamping their feet against the cold, rifles slung over their shoulders. They paid little attention to him, just another prisoner moving snow. "Got the package off to Billy yesterday," one guard said, a tall man with reddish stubble. "Hope it makes it in time for his birthday." "What did you send?" asked the other, younger with glasses that kept fogging up. "Toy soldiers. Carved 'em myself during night shifts." The red-haired guard laughed. "Helen says he lines 'em up all over the living room floor, playing war." "Kids," the younger one smiled. "My little girl's only 3. Got her a stuffed bear for Christmas. Wife says she won't put it down, even sleeps with it." "You wrap it yourself?" "Tried to. Looked like a dog chewed up the paper. Martha redid it when I wasn't looking." Akira kept shoveling, his movements mechanical while his mind raced to process what little English he understood. He shouldn't be listening, shouldn't care about their families. Yet, he couldn't stop. These men spoke of their children with the same pride his own father had shown, the same tenderness. "You know what I miss most?" The younger guard's voice dropped lower. "Sitting in the kitchen while Martha cooks, just watching her move around, listening to her hum. Stupid thing to miss, right? Nah. I miss Helen reading in bed. Always has her nose in a book." There was a pause. "Think we'll be home by next Christmas?" "God, I hope so." Akira's shovel hit a patch of ice. The sound made both guards glance his way, then return to their conversation, now about baseball. But the damage was done. Their earlier words echoed in his head like a temple bell. These men were not the savages from training films. They carved toys, missed their wives, hoped to go home. Just like him. Back in the barracks that evening, a group gathered around Tanaka, who was doing an impression of an American officer's walk. "So big," So clumsy. Tanaka exaggerated a swagger. They think war is like their movies. No discipline, no spirit, only technology and luck. The others laughed. Normally, Akira would have joined them. Instead, he sat on his bunk, pretending to mend a sock, while the unsettling truth settled over him like the snow outside. Americans are soft, someone said. That's why we'll win in the end. Our spirit is stronger. Akira thought of the guard carving toy soldiers during night shifts, patience in each small cut of wood. Was that softness? Or something else entirely? Night fell. The barracks grew quiet except for soft snoring. Akira lay rigid under his thin blanket, listening to the murmur of guards changing shifts outside. Their voices drifted through the walls, ordinary voices, talking about coffee, the cold, a letter from home. He tried to push away the images. The red-haired guard's son playing with carved soldiers, the young girl clutching her teddy bear, women waiting in faraway American homes. His hands curled into fists beneath the blanket. They are not like us, he whispered to himself. They cannot be. But the words hung empty in the darkness. They sounded like the propaganda posters now, hollow and unconvincing. What if the enemy was human too? What would that mean about everything he'd been taught? Everything he'd done in the name of the emperor? Akira squeezed his eyes shut, but sleep remained distant, kept away by questions he had never dared to ask. Morning roll call came early, the sky still dark with lingering night. Prisoners stood in straight lines outside the barracks, breath visible in the frigid air. Akira stared straight ahead, counting the seconds until they could return to the relative warmth inside. A noise broke the silence. A wet, hacking cough followed by a thud. 3 men down from Akira, Yamamoto had collapsed face first into the snow. His body shook with fever, coughs racking his thin frame. The prisoners stiffened. No one moved to help. In the Imperial Army, showing weakness meant punishment. Akira remembered a march through the Philippines when a young soldier had fallen from exhaustion. Their lieutenant had ordered the others to beat him with rifle butts for disgracing the emperor's army. The boy had died that night, alone by the road. Akira braced himself, waiting for American anger at the disruption. Instead, the guard supervising roll call waved urgently toward the medical hut. "Medic! Got a sick one here!" A young American in a white coat jogged over, medical bag in hand. He knelt beside Yamamoto without hesitation, touching the man's forehead, then checking his pulse. His movements were gentle, methodical. "He's burning up. Help me get him to the infirmary," the medic said, glancing at the guard. 2 Americans lifted Yamamoto, carrying him toward the medical building. The rest of roll call continued as if nothing had happened. No punishment, no mockery, just matter-of-fact concern. Later, Akira passed by the infirmary window. Inside, the American medic sat beside Yamamoto's bed, patiently spooning water between the sick man's lips. A bottle of medicine stood on the table. The medic's face showed concentration, not disgust. Something twisted in Akira's chest, a feeling he couldn't name. The enemy was caring for a fallen Japanese soldier with more humanity than their own officers had shown. The contradiction made him dizzy, as if the ground itself had shifted beneath his feet. Back in the barracks, men whispered about Yamamoto. "They'll let him die," one said. "Why waste medicine on prisoners?" "No," another argued. "They treated Sato's pneumonia last month. He got better." Akira sat silent, remembering his lieutenant's face contorted with rage as the exhausted soldier was beaten. He'd stood by, believing it necessary, believing in strength above all. Now that certainty felt poisoned. If the enemy showed mercy where his own people showed cruelty, what did that mean? Had his loyalty been misplaced? That night, Unable to sleep, Akira moved to the window. Moonlight illuminated the camp, turning snow to silver. Near the fence, a dark figure knelt alone. Akira squinted, making out the shape of a guard, the young one with glasses who had spoken of his daughter. The guard's head was bowed, a small book open in his gloved hands. His lips moved silently, eyes closed. A Bible. He was praying, alone in the cold, vulnerable and unashamed. Akira turned away sharply, as if burned. He crawled back to his bunk and pulled the thin blanket over his head. But he couldn't escape the image seared into his mind. An enemy soldier kneeling in prayer, showing faith and humility under the same sky that covered them all. His chest felt hollow, scraped clean of certainty. The Americans were supposed to be godless barbarians. That's what every speech, every poster, every training session had hammered into him. But the man praying in the snow told a different story. A story that made everything Akira had believed feel like ash in his mouth. The mess hall buzzed with morning conversation, but Akira barely noticed. He stared at the bowl of porridge before him, steam rising in lazy curls. His spoon hovered above the surface, reluctant to break it. He forced himself to take a bite. The porridge felt different in his mouth today, thick and pasty, sticking to his tongue. The bread tasted like clay. Each swallow required effort, as if his body was rejecting more than just food. Americans can't even make proper rice, Tanaka muttered from across the table. My dog ate better than this. Several prisoners laughed. Akira lowered his eyes and continued eating mechanically. Once, he would have joined in their contempt. Now their words rang hollow, like noises from a distant room. Did you see how they babied Yamamoto? Tanaka continued, pretending to care. It's all for show. The Red Cross must be visiting soon. Akira set down his spoon. Yamamoto might have died without help. The table went quiet. Tanaka narrowed his eyes. Since when do you defend American kindness? I'm not defending anything, Akira said, but the words felt weak, even to himself. He stood abruptly, leaving his half-eaten breakfast behind. Outside, the morning air bit at his face. Work assignments would begin soon, clearing paths, chopping wood for the stoves. Akira walked alone to the tool shed, his breath creating clouds that dissolved into nothing. As he shoveled snow, the rhythm of work usually emptied his mind. Not today. The image of the kneeling guard returned again and again, head bowed, Bible open, lips moving in private devotion. No one was watching. There had been no audience to impress, no performance for prisoners to see. Just a man speaking to his God under a winter sky. Akira paused, leaning on his shovel. What would his father say if he could see inside Akira's mind now? His father, who had sent him off to war with fierce pride, who had told him that to die for the emperor was the highest honor. Would he call his son a traitor for these doubts? And his mother, gentle, quiet, always lighting incense at their small family shrine. Did she still believe Japan was winning the war? Did she still think Americans were monsters? Or did she, in the privacy of her heart, just want her son to come home alive? The Christmas celebration now felt like a cruel joke, not because the Americans had been deceitful, but because they had been sincere. The orange, the hymns, the prayer for peace, all of it had cracked something fundamental inside him. The warmth had become unbearable, because it contradicted everything he had been taught to believe. When evening came, Akira sat alone on his bunk, while others played cards or talked in hushed voices. He reached beneath his thin mattress, fingers finding the small cloth pouch he had fashioned from a scrap of his undershirt. Inside was the dried orange peel, now brittle and curled. He brought it to his nose, inhaling deeply. The scent had faded, but was still there, sweet, tangy, with an undertone of bitterness, like a memory of something that could never be recaptured. The orange peel had become both gift and curse. A gift because it had shown him a moment of pure generosity from an unexpected source. A curse because that generosity had destroyed the foundations of his belief. He could never go back to who he was before Christmas Day, before the chaplain's prayer, before the guard kneeling in the snow. Akira closed his eyes, the scent of orange lingering in his nostrils. The peel felt fragile between his fingers, like the remnants of a world that no longer existed. February crept into March. The hard-packed snow began to soften around the edges of the camp, revealing patches of mud and dead grass. The barracks grew less frigid at night, and Akira found himself using one blanket instead of two. In the crowded mess hall, voices grew louder as spirits lifted with the warming weather. Men leaned across tables, gesturing with spoons, their laughter echoing against the wooden walls. "My wife makes pickled plums so sour they make your eyes water," Ito announced, his thin face animated. "When I return home, I will eat nothing else for a week." "If your wife hasn't already found a better man," Tanaka joked, earning shoves and chuckles. "Americans eat nothing but sugar and fat," someone else chimed in. "No wonder they're so soft in battle." The conversation shifted as it always did, from memories of home to mockery of their captors. Akira stirred his soup, watching ripples form and disappear. He had not spoken more than necessary in weeks. "I heard from the new prisoners that in the camp near California, they make men work 16 hours in fields," Nakamura said, lowering his voice. "No water, no rest." Heads nodded. Eyes narrowed with satisfaction at this confirmation of what they wanted to believe. "And at the one in Texas, a guard shot 3 men for talking during roll call," another added. Akira looked up. How would new prisoners know what happens in other American camps? The table went quiet. Nakamura frowned. "Are you calling me a liar?" "No," Akira said softly. "I'm just asking how they would know." No one answered. They turned back to their food, but something had changed. The invisible wall between Akira and his fellow prisoners grew thicker, more solid. Later, chopping wood, he felt their stares on his back. Once, he had been part of them, united in their hatred, their certainty. Now he stood apart, neither fully Japanese nor American, a man without a country, without conviction. He split log after log, the axe blade biting into wood with satisfying cracks. The work filled his hands, but not his mind. In the barracks, he stayed on his bunk when others gathered to talk. He no longer felt anger at their propaganda-filled chatter, only a deep, hollow sadness. The guards, too, remained distant figures, not monsters, but not friends. He could see their humanity now, but what good did that knowledge do him? It only left him stranded between worlds, unable to hate, unable to belong. One evening, as light faded across the camp, Akira found himself standing alone by the fence. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. From the small wooden chapel near the guard quarters, voices rose in song, the same hymns he had heard at Christmas, but softer now, more distant. He closed his eyes, letting the melody wash over him. The words were still foreign, but something in the music reached past language. It spoke of longing, of hope, of something larger than camps and wars and countries. Akira's throat tightened. He wasn't sure what he yearned for anymore. Not victory, not even home exactly. Perhaps just for the world to make sense again, for certainty to return. The singing continued, pure and haunting in the twilight. He stood motionless, listening until the last note faded into the darkening sky, feeling an ache for something he could not name and could never possess. Early April brought rain. The last patches of snow vanished into the earth, leaving the camp a patchwork of mud and emerging grass. The scent of wet soil filled the air, rich and alive, after months of frozen stillness. Akira sat alone on a wooden bench near the barracks, watching raindrops collect on his boots. The morning sun broke weakly through clouds, casting pale light across the compound. Between his fingers, he rolled the brittle orange peel, now faded to a dull amber. Its edges had curled inward, hardened by time. 6 months ago, he had stepped off the transport truck, expecting torture or death. He had come prepared to face American devils with the stoic courage of a Japanese soldier. He had been ready to die with honor, to keep his spirit unbroken. Now, watching an American guard laugh with another by the mess hall door, Akira felt the hollow space where certainty had once lived. That soldier was gone, the one who believed Japan would never surrender, who saw the world divided neatly into heroes and monsters. That man had dissolved slowly, melted away by small kindnesses, an orange at Christmas, a prayer for peace, a doctor's gentle hands on a sick comrade. "Who am I now?" he whispered to himself, the words lost in the soft patter of rain. Not Japanese, not truly, not anymore. His loyalty remained, but the pure flame of unquestioning devotion had dimmed, yet certainly not American either, just human, lost in the space between faiths. He ran his thumb over the orange peel's rough surface. How would he explain this to his father, who had sent him off with proud tears? To his mother, who had tied 1,000-stitch belt around his waist for protection? What words could capture how the enemy's humanity had broken him more thoroughly than any torture? A bird landed on the fence nearby, pecking at something in the mud before flying away. The war would end someday. He might return to his village, walk the familiar streets, bow at the shrine on the hill, but he would be a stranger there now, carrying this terrible knowledge, that the monsters in American propaganda were men who sang hymns and prayed for their children, that kindness could exist across battle lines. Some prisoners had managed to keep their hatred pure, untouched by doubt. Akira almost envied them. They would return home whole, their vision of the world intact. He would return fractured, rebuilt around a truth too painful to share. The rain fell harder. Drops splashed onto the orange peel, darkening spots of the brittle skin. Akira closed his fingers around it, protecting the fragile memento. From the chapel, faint singing drifted across the compound. Sunday service had begun. The melody carried on the damp air, familiar now after months of Sundays. Akira didn't understand the words, but he recognized the cadence of prayer, of hope. He lifted the orange peel to his face and breathed in. The scent was barely there, just a ghost of sweetness, a memory of Christmas night when everything began to change. He closed his eyes, letting the rain dampen his hair, his shoulders. What waited beyond the war, he couldn't know. Shame, perhaps. Confusion. A lifetime of carrying this fracture within him. But as the hymn floated over the barbed wire, mingling with the rhythm of the rain, Akira sat motionless, neither prisoner nor enemy, just a man holding the dried remnant of unexpected kindness in his palm, facing a future he could no longer imagine.